Sixers and they get inside.
He went over T'Challa.
He's got it.
They've escaped.
When Julius Erving said he's my GOAT, he was not chasing a trend. He was not trying to go viral. He was not copying anyone else's list. He was speaking from a place that most people in sports today have completely forgotten about. He was speaking from memory, from history, from a time when basketball was still being invented by the men who dared to imagine it differently. And when his list came out, the internet went quiet for a second. Then it exploded. People were confused, people were frustrated. Some were flat out angry. Where was LeBron James? Where was Kobe Bryant? Where was Shaquille O'Neal? Where was Stephen Curry? These are the names that dominate every argument today. These are the names on every highlight reel, every podcast, every debate show. So when Dr. J released his 7 favorite players of all time, and none of those modern giants made the cut, a lot of people started asking the same question. Has Julius Erving lost his mind? Is he just being stubborn? Is he too old to understand what basketball is now? But here's the thing about that reaction. It tells you more about us than it does about him. Because Julius Erving is not a random former player giving a hot take. He is one of the architects of the game you're watching right now. He scored 30,026 professional points. He won 4 MVP awards. He won 3 championships. He played in 2 different leagues and changed the look of basketball in both of them. When Dr. J speaks about greatness, he is not guessing. He has lived inside it. And if you love old-school basketball greatness like this, go ahead and give this video some hype right now. Hit that button. Stories like Dr. J's deserve to be pushed back into the light. Because what he is saying is not bitter, it is not confused, it is wise. And once you understand where Julius Erving came from, once you understand the road he walked, his list starts to make perfect sense. Dr. J has 2 rules that almost nobody talks about. The first rule is simple. His core group of favorite players was locked in his mind when he was about 15 years old. He watched those men play. He studied them. He built his entire understanding of basketball greatness around what they did. And that core has never changed. Not once. The second rule is just as firm. He does not rank active players. He will not do it. He believes a career has to be completely finished before you can truly judge it. He has said it plainly. Let them get finished. That is his position. A legacy is a closed book, not a live debate. So when fans ask why LeBron James is not on the list, the answer is not that Dr. J disrespects LeBron. The answer is that LeBron's story is not over yet. And Dr. J refuses to judge a story that has not ended. Now, let us talk about the 7 players Julius Erving loves most. We are going to count them down. We are going to start from number 7 and work all the way to number 1. And by the time we get to the end, you will understand something about basketball that most highlight packages will never show you. Number 7. Nate "Tiny" Archibald. This is the one that surprises people the most. When Julius Erving sat down and named his 7 favorite players, he passed over Larry Bird. He passed over Hakeem Olajuwon. He passed over Tim Duncan. He passed over players who won multiple championships. Players who changed entire franchises. Players who are carved into the Mount Rushmore of their positions. And he chose Tiny Archibald instead. At first glance, that sounds almost impossible to defend. Tiny Archibald stood 6 feet and 1 inch tall. In a league full of giants that is practically small. He played in an era when big men ruled everything. Centers dominated the game. Size was the most important thing on the floor. And here was this quick little guard from the streets of New York, trying to survive in a world built against him. But here's what Nate Archibald did that nobody else has ever done. Not before him, not after him. In the 1972-73 season, Tiny Archibald led the entire NBA in both scoring and assists at the same time. He averaged 34, 0 points per game and 11, 4 assists per game in the same year. Think about what that means. He was the best scorer in the whole league, and the best playmaker in the whole league, in the same season. That has never happened again in the history of professional basketball. It has been over 50 years. Nobody has come close. But for Julius Erving, the numbers are only part of the story. Dr. J grew up loving the playgrounds of New York. He understood the language of street ball. He understood what it meant to be fast, to be creative, to play with joy and fearlessness. Tiny Archibald was built from that same world. He brought the transition game. He brought the flair, he brought the speed, he brought the courage to be small in a big man's sport and still find a way to be the best person in the building. Irving played in the ABA for years. The ABA was a league that loved fast play. It loved creativity. It loved players who could push the pace and make the crowd hold their breath. Tiny Archibald fit that spirit perfectly. He was not just a player, he was a style. He was proof that you did not need to be huge to be great. You needed to be fearless. And in Dr. J's world, fearlessness is everything. Think about what it takes to do what Tiny Archibald did. You are a 6'1" guard in a league where everybody is bigger than you. Every center is a foot taller and 100 pounds heavier. And yet Tiny found a way not just to survive, but to be the very best player in the building on most nights. He was not just fast, he was smart. He knew exactly where to go with the ball before he even caught it. He could thread passes through gaps that other players never even saw. And when he had space, he could score from anywhere on the floor. Dr. J grew up loving the playgrounds of New York. That world produced a style of play that was faster, more creative, and more expressive than anything being taught in any gym. And Tiny Archibald carried all of that into the professional game without losing a single drop of it. He did not adjust himself to fit the NBA. He made the NBA adjust to him. For Julius Erving, who carried that same spirit into the professional ranks, Tiny Archibald was proof that the game's soul could survive in the big leagues. Number 6. Jerry West. Not everyone who watches basketball today knows what Jerry West really was. They might know that his silhouette is the official logo of the NBA. They might have heard his name. But the full picture of what Jerry West meant to the game is something that younger fans have mostly missed. And Julius Erving has not missed a single frame of it. Jerry West was the standard of what a shooting guard could be. He had a pure, high-release jump shot that defenders could not get to. It was fast. It was clean. It was almost impossible to block. He could score from anywhere on the perimeter. He could create off the dribble. He could pass. He could defend. He had no real weakness that opponents could attack. But what truly set Jerry West apart was what he did when the game was on the line. In big moments, in pressure situations, in playoff games, West was ice cold. He earned the nickname Mr. Clutch for a reason. He showed up when it mattered most. That is the hardest thing for any player to do consistently. And West did it over and over throughout his career. He led the Los Angeles Lakers to 9 NBA Finals appearances. 9. The NBA Finals is the hardest stage in the sport to reach, and he reached it 9 times. His scoring, his toughness, and his will to compete became the measuring stick for every guard who came after him. For Erving, who watched West play during those formative years as a teenager, West showed what guard play was supposed to look like. He showed that a smaller player could be elite, that skill and intelligence could beat size, that pure shooting and competitive fire could carry a team to the biggest moments in the sport. When Dr. J thinks about the backcourt, Jerry West is one of the first 2 names that come to mind without any hesitation. He is untouchable in that spot, and when you understand why, you start to understand the kind of basketball education Julius Erving gave himself before he ever played a single professional game. What people often miss about Jerry West is that he was not just a scorer. He was a complete guard. His defense was elite. He pressured the ball, got into passing lanes, and made the job of opposing ball handlers miserable every single night. And his will to compete was unmatched. There are players who shrink under finals pressure. Jerry West was the opposite. He expanded under pressure. He became more focused, more precise, more dangerous. The bigger the moment, the sharper he got. That is a quality you either have or you do not. And West had it in amounts that very few players in the history of the sport have ever matched. Julius Erving recognized that quality because he had it himself. He knew what it felt like to want the ball in the biggest moments. And watching West do it year after year gave young Julius Erving a model for what a great competitor truly looks like. Number 5. Oscar Robertson. If Jerry West is the standard of the shooting guard position, then Oscar Robertson is the standard of something even bigger. Oscar Robertson is the standard of what a guard can be when every single limit is removed. Oscar Robertson was 6 feet and 5 inches tall. That is enormous for a guard, especially in the era he played in. And he used every inch of that size to do things that smaller guards simply could not do. He could post up guards who were shorter than him. He could shoot over defenders who tried to crowd him. He could pass through any defense with his vision. He could rebound from the guard position. He could control an entire game by himself. In his first 5 professional seasons, Oscar Robertson averaged a triple-double every single season. A triple-double means at least 10 points, 10 rebounds, and 10 assists in a game. Averaging that across an entire season is almost unthinkable. He did it across 5 straight years. That level of all-around performance was not matched for over 50 years in the NBA. Before anyone used the word positionless basketball, before anyone talked about players who can do everything, Oscar Robertson was already doing it. He did not fit any single position because he was better than everyone at every position. He was a complete basketball player at a time when most players were only expected to do 1 or 2 things well. Julius Erving watched Oscar Robertson and saw something he valued more than almost anything else in the game: total control. Not just scoring control, not just playmaking control, full, complete control of the basketball game from the guard position. Erving, who himself was a dominant rebounder in college and a versatile scorer in the ABA, recognized a kindred spirit in Robertson. A player who refused to be limited? A player who made the entire game smaller by being bigger than all of it. That is why Oscar Robertson is untouchable in Erving's backcourt. It is worth pausing on what it meant to average a triple-double for 5 full seasons in today's game. A player who gets a triple-double in a single game is celebrated. Oscar Robertson averaged it over entire years, every game, home or away. Early season or late playoff push. He did this while leading his team, guarding the other team's best backcourt player, and affecting the game in every possible way. He was doing everything all the time. Dr. J loved this because he understood it. In the ABA, Erving was not just a scorer. He was a rebounder, a playmaker, a defensive force. He wanted to affect the game in every way possible. And Robertson was the clearest example in history of what that total commitment to the full game looked like at the guard position. Robertson also won a championship with the Milwaukee Bucks in 1971, teaming with a young Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, 2 of Dr. J's top 7 players on the same team, winning together for Erving. That was not a coincidence. That was just what happens when true greatness meets more true greatness. Number 4, Wilt Chamberlain. There has never been anyone like Wilt Chamberlain in the history of basketball. Not before him, not since. When you talk about physical dominance, when you talk about what one body can do to an entire sport, Wilt Chamberlain is the only conversation. He scored 100 points in a single game. 100 points. That number still sounds made up. It sounds impossible, but it happened. And it did not happen because Wilt was playing against bad players. It happened because Wilt was so physically overpowering that the defense had no real answer for what he was doing. He averaged over 50 points per game for an entire season. Think about that for one moment. 50 points per game. Every game for a full season. The very best scorers in the modern NBA average around 30 points per game and are celebrated as historic. Wilt averaged 50. He was operating in a dimension that no other player has ever touched. His size, his strength, his athleticism, and his will to dominate forced the NBA to rewrite its own rulebook. The league changed rules specifically to limit what Wilt could do. When a sport has to change its rules because of one single player, that player has already proven something that statistics cannot fully capture. He has proven that he is bigger than the game as it was designed. Julius Erving includes Wilt Chamberlain in his untouchable front court because Erving understands what true physical dominance means. He faced physical centers himself in the ABA. On his very first professional game, he challenged Artis Gilmore, who was 7 feet and 2 inches tall, and Dan Issel, who was 6 feet and 9 inches tall. He drove into that paint, hung in the air, and dunked on both of them so hard that he fell backward to the floor. He knew what it felt like to test your game against the biggest bodies in the sport. And Wilt Chamberlain was the biggest body of them all, not just in size, in force, in impact, in the way he changed the competitive balance of every game he played. Dr. J knows that no list of basketball's greatest is honest if Wilt's name is not somewhere near the top. There is something else that makes Wilt Chamberlain's legacy remarkable. Something that often gets lost when people only focus on the scoring numbers. Wilt could do everything. Late in his career, he intentionally stopped scoring as much and focused on rebounding and assists. He led the league in assists one season. A 7-foot center who led the league in assists. He did it because he wanted to prove he could. He was not just a physical specimen. He was a basketball thinker who happened to be built like a monument. Erving respects that more than most people understand, because he lived inside that world. He was the player who flew, and he had the deepest respect for the players who had the weight to make the ground shake when they moved. Number 3. Bill Russell. Here is something that separates Julius Erving from almost every sports analyst you will ever hear. He does not only value scoring, He does not only value flash, he does not only value highlight plays, he values winning. He values the players who figured out how to make their team better in ways that never show up in a box score. Bill Russell is the greatest example of that in the history of the sport. Bill Russell won 11 NBA championships in 13 seasons with the Boston Celtics. 11 titles in 13 years. That is a record across all major North American professional sports. No team in football, baseball, basketball, or hockey has ever achieved anything close to that kind of sustained winning. And at the center of every single one of those championships was Bill Russell. But here is what makes Russell's story so fascinating. He did not win those championships by scoring. His career scoring average was about 15 points per game. That is solid, but it is not the kind of number that makes people think GOAT. Russell won by doing something harder and rarer. He changed the way the center position worked. Before Russell, the center was mostly a scoring position. You stood in the post, you caught the ball, you turned around and scored. That was the job. Russell threw all of that away. He turned the center into a defensive command post. He blocked shots with surgical precision. He positioned his body in a way that made it almost impossible to get a clean look near the basket. He controlled the glass. He started the fast break with outlet passes that turned defense into offense in less than a second. He used his mind to understand angles and tendencies in a way that made him the smartest defensive player on the floor every single night. And his teammates won, again, and again, and again. Julius Erving played in the ABA, a league that valued fast break basketball and defensive energy. He understood what it meant to have an anchor in the paint. He understood that a great defensive center changed everything about how you could play on offense. He saw in Bill Russell the player who proved that the most valuable thing on a basketball court is not the player who scores the most. It is the player who makes winning the only possible outcome. That is who Bill Russell was, and that is why he is number 3 on this list. There is a deeper layer to the Bill Russell story that connects directly to Julius Erving's own basketball DNA. Russell was the anchor of a fast break system. He would block a shot or grab a defensive rebound, and then immediately fire an outlet pass to a guard streaking up the floor. That chain of events, defense into offense in one heartbeat, was the engine of the Boston Celtics dynasty. It is also the engine of every exciting team that has played basketball since. The ABA, where Erving built his game, was a league that ran, a league that pushed the pace. And that whole style traces back in a direct line to what Bill Russell made possible in Boston. He proved that fast break basketball could win championships. He proved it could dominate an era. When Erving looks at Bill Russell, he sees a player who changed the DNA of the sport, not through scoring or flash, but through intelligence, positioning, and a commitment to winning at all costs. 11 championships, 13 seasons, one of the greatest winners in the history of American professional sports. Dr. J respected that more than almost anything else. Because at the end of the day, nobody cares about individual statistics. They care about who won. Number 2, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Julius Erving has a favorite player. We will get to him in a moment. But when you ask Dr. J who the greatest basketball player of all time is, the answer is not his emotional favorite. The answer is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And the reasoning is airtight. Kareem is Dr. J's GOAT, not because of one season, not because of one shot, but because of everything. The full weight of a full career. The total sum of a complete life in basketball. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar won 6 NBA championships. He did it in 2 completely different places, with 2 completely different supporting casts. He anchored the Milwaukee Bucks into a dynasty early in his career. Then he moved to Los Angeles and anchored the Showtime Lakers into one of the most beloved dynasties in the history of the sport. Different teams, different decades, different rosters, same result, championships. He won 6 MVP awards. That is the most in NBA history, 6 times. The entire league looked around at every player on every team and said the same thing. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is the best basketball player in the world, 6 times. He finished his career with 38,387 regular season points. That is the all-time record in the NBA. He set it in an era with no three-point line providing easy bonus points. He set it without the advantage of modern sports science, modern nutrition, and modern training methods. He set it by playing at an incredibly high level from his 20s all the way into his 40s. And the weapon that made all of it possible is the most beautiful and devastating move in basketball history, the skyhook. Kareem would catch the ball on the low block, take one step, extend his arm high above his head, and release the ball in a soft arc toward the basket. It was unblockable. Defenders tried for 2 decades to stop it. Nobody found an answer. The shot was geometrically perfect. It was physically unreachable. It was basketball architecture. For Julius Erving, who values skill, longevity, winning, and durability above everything else in his GOAT evaluation, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar checks every single box. He was not just great for a moment, he was great for a generation. And that is what separated him from everyone else in Erving's mind. Think about what it means to win 6 MVP awards. That is not luck. That is the whole league, across different decades and different styles of play, arriving at the same conclusion 6 separate times. The best basketball player in the world is wearing number 33. Kareem also played through the most dramatic changes the sport has ever seen. He played in the slow, methodical NBA of the early 1970s. He played in the wide-open Showtime era of the 1980s. He adapted. He remained dominant across all of it. And the skyhook. Defenders spent 20 years trying to stop it. Nobody ever did. The shot was released so high that no human being could get to it without fouling. It was the safest, most unstoppable offensive weapon in the history of the game. And Kareem used it 38,387 times on his way to the all-time scoring record. That is Dr. J's GOAT. And honestly, when you lay it all out, it is very hard to argue. Now we are at number 1. The player Julius Erving has called his absolute favorite of all time. The player who changed what Dr. J thought was possible. The player who, without ever knowing it, created the blueprint that Julius Erving would spend his entire career perfecting. Number 1. Elgin Baylor. Before there was Dr. J, there was Elgin Baylor. And that is not just a statement about timing. That is a statement about lineage, about where things come from, about who imagined the path first. Elgin Baylor did something in basketball that nobody had ever done before him. He took the game off the ground. He introduced a vertical dimension to the small forward position that simply did not exist until he showed up. Before Baylor, basketball was mostly horizontal. Players moved side to side. They set up plays, they made passes, they caught and shot from their feet. The game was organized, methodical, and earthbound. Baylor changed all of that. He drove toward the basket and then refused to land. He hung in the air. He created mid-air body control that defenders had never seen and did not know how to guard. He used hanging jump shots, creative drives, and acrobatic layups to score in ways that looked like they belonged to a different sport. His moves looked improvised because they were. He was making up new basketball in real time, every night, in front of crowds that could not believe what they were seeing. He made the small forward position feel like art. Julius Erving watched Elgin Baylor as a teenager, and something clicked inside him. He looked at what Baylor was doing, looked at his own body, looked at his own instincts, and recognized something. He recognized that this was the path. This was the language. This was the style of play that fit who he was. He modeled his own game after Baylor. He took what Baylor showed him, and then he made it louder. He made it higher. He made it longer. When Dr. J entered the ABA with the Virginia Squires at 21 years old, he brought all of that vertical creativity with him and turned up the volume on it. He averaged 27, 3 points and 15, 7 rebounds per game in his first season. He led the league in offensive rebounds. In his very first professional game against the Kentucky Colonels and their massive front court of Artis Gilmore and Dan Issel, Erving drove to the rim and threw down a dunk so powerful that it knocked him flat on his back. He was 21 years old. He was fearless. He had learned from watching Baylor that the air was the safest place to be. When you look at Erving's college career, you start to see how much he had already internalized Baylor's lessons. At the University of Massachusetts, Erving averaged 26, 3 points and 20, 2 rebounds per game. He is one of only 5 players in the history of NCAA men's basketball to average more than 20 points and 20 rebounds per game. On his 21st birthday, he put up 36 points, 32 rebounds, and 7 assists against Syracuse, in front of a crowd that had packed beyond its limit just to watch him play. This was Baylor's influence in action. Total control of the game from the wing. Scoring, rebounding, passing, creating, refusing to be limited to just one part of the game. In 1972, there was an off-season exhibition called the Super Game. It brought together the best players from the ABA and the NBA to compete on one court. During that game, Erving stole the ball from Paul Silas and drove past Archie Clark. Then he took off from the free throw line and threw down one of the most legendary dunks in basketball history. While a backpedaling Oscar Robertson, one of his own untouchable heroes, watched with his mouth open in amazement. Dr. J did not just admire his heroes, he played against them. He performed in their presence. He tested himself on the same floor as the men he had worshipped as a kid, and then he showed that he belonged. In 1976, Irving won the first ever ABA slam dunk contest at the All-Star Game. He took off from the free throw line and glided through the air as if Elgin Baylor's memory was carrying him. It was the most famous dunk in the history of the contest. It became the image that defined what a dunk contest could be. In 1977, after the ABA and NBA merged and Irving joined the Philadelphia 76ers, he went to the NBA Finals for the first time. He faced Bill Walton and the Portland Trail Blazers. In Game 6 of that series, he executed a thunderous dunk over Walton, one of his untouchable heroes, on the biggest stage, in front of the whole world. In 1980, in the NBA Finals against the Los Angeles Lakers, Irving performed what many people still call the single most beautiful play in basketball history. He drove the baseline, went behind the backboard, floated through the air, and released a reverse layup on the other side of the glass with the softest touch imaginable. He evaded Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, his own personal GOAT pick, and Mark Landsberger at the same time. The Lakers won that series. A rookie named Magic Johnson was unbelievable, but nobody who was in the building that night forgot what Dr. J did on that play. It was something from another world. In 1983, Irving finally won his NBA title. It took a trade to bring Moses Malone to Philadelphia. Malone anchored the paint the way Mel Daniels had once anchored it in the ABA. He grabbed every rebound, he controlled the interior. He freed Irving to operate on the perimeter the way he had always been built to operate. That year, the 76ers went 65-17 in the regular season. Irving punctuated it with his famous rock the baby dunk over Michael Cooper of the Lakers. He cupped the ball on his forearm, soared to the basket, and slammed it home in a single flowing motion. Pure Baylor, pure flight, pure Dr. J. Now let us pull back and look at everything together. Because when you lay all 7 names next to each other, you stop seeing a list, you start seeing a map, you start seeing the basketball education of one of the greatest players who ever lived. Tiny Archibald gave Dr. J the playgrounds, the speed, the fearlessness of a small man in a big world, the proof that creativity and quickness could beat size. Jerry West gave Dr. J the standard of the perimeter, the clutch jump shot, the cold competitor who never wilted when the game was biggest, the proof that skill and toughness could carry you to the finals over and over. Oscar Robertson gave Dr. J the vision of total control, the all-around player who refused to be defined by one role, the man who was averaging triple-doubles before anybody had a name for it. Wilt Chamberlain gave Dr. J the understanding of physical force, what it looks like when one body is so dominant that the sport itself has to adjust, the reminder that some things in basketball are simply beyond explanation. Bill Russell gave Dr. J the definition of winning, not scoring, winning. The player who built his legacy on championships and championships alone, the proof that the greatest value on a basketball team is the ability to make your teammates better. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar gave Dr. J the standard of longevity, the GOAT, the player who carried his excellence across decades, across teams, across eras. The player whose career, when viewed in full, stands above every other career that has ever been completed. And Elgin Baylor gave Dr. J everything else: the flight, the creativity, the vertical game, the courage to take the game somewhere nobody had ever taken it. The style that Irving would claim as his own, and then carry to heights that Baylor himself never quite reached. There is something important to understand about why Irving leaves modern players off his list. It is not bitterness. It is not old man stubbornness. It is not a failure to appreciate what Kobe Bryant or LeBron James or Stephen Curry have done. It is something more thoughtful than that. Irving believes in creators. He believes that the highest honor in basketball belongs to the first person who imagined a new way to play, not the person who optimized it later with better training and better technology. The person who dreamed it first. Kobe Bryant was magnificent, but Irving has noted that Kobe was, at his core, an optimized version of Michael Jordan. And Michael Jordan was himself an evolution of the style that Irving and Baylor pioneered together. The lineage is real. The creativity flows in one direction, from Baylor, through Irving, through Jordan, through Kobe. But in Irving's mind, the original creators carry a weight that the refiners can never fully match, no matter how brilliant they become. And then there's the finished career rule. Irving will not rank active players. He thinks it is premature. Legacy requires completion. You cannot judge a story while it is still being written. That is his standard. And it is a more serious standard than almost anything modern sports analysis applies. Julius Irving's 7 favorite players are not names from the past. They are the roots of the game you are watching right now. Everything you love about modern basketball traces back to these 7 men. They built the road, and then Julius Irving flew across it. He did not invent flight from nothing. He watched Elgin Baylor and saw what was possible. He studied Oscar Robertson and learned that limits were made to be broken. He watched Bill Russell win and understood that championships were the only real measuring stick. He saw Wilt Chamberlain force the league to rewrite its rules and grasp the meaning of true physical dominance. He watched Jerry West drain clutch shots in the biggest moments and understood what ice in the veins actually looked like. He watched Tiny Archibald light up the league at 6 feet and 1 inch and felt the fire of playground basketball burning inside him. And then he went out and became the player who connected all of those lessons into one body, one career, one legacy that still echoes through every arena in the world. That is who Julius Irving is. That is what his list means. That is why these 7 players are not just his favorites. They are pieces of him. They are the men who built Dr. J before Dr. J even knew he was being built. When he says he's my GOAT about Kareem, he means it with the full weight of someone who has spent his entire life studying the game at the highest level. When he names Elgin Baylor as his personal favorite, he means it with the gratitude of a student who never forgot his teacher. And when he skips the modern names, he does it with the patience of a man who knows that great stories deserve to be finished before they are judged. Julius Irving flew higher than almost anyone. But even he knew he was standing on someone else's shoulders, and those shoulders belonged to 7 men who changed basketball forever, before most of the world knew how to watch it properly. Because even the greatest players who ever lived needed someone to show them the way up.
I know why I picked mine.
Gonna get an easy basket.
Oscar Robertson will inbound at.
Watch him die for the ball right here. Look.
He's made me want to retire. And for Dave Cowens, that was not weakness, it was respect. Dave Cowens spent his whole career crashing into giants. He fought against men who were taller than him, stronger than him, and just as hungry to win as he was. Some nights, after battling players who felt impossible to stop, Cowens walked off the floor more tired than he had ever felt in his life. He thought about how hard this game really was. He thought about quitting before his body gave out on him. But that feeling never turned into bitterness. It turned into respect, because only a player who has stood face to face with greatness can really know what greatness looks like. This is the story of the players Dave Cowens respected the most, and the story of how he learned to judge a basketball player the right way. And if stories like this deserve more love, use the hype feature and give this video some hype, because players like Cowens built this game with work that most fans never even saw. Dave Cowens was not built like other superstars of his time. He stood 6 feet 9 inches tall, which sounds tall, but in his world, where centers often stood 7 feet or more, it was small. He played with a head of bright red hair and a temper that matched it on the court. But off the court, friends and teammates described him as humble, blunt, and almost shy about his own success. He was born on October 25, 1948, in Newport, Kentucky. In 1970, the Boston Celtics picked him 4th in the draft. The team was hurting that year. Their old leader, Bill Russell, had just retired, and nobody knew who would step up to fill that hole in the middle of the floor. Cowens did not try to copy the slow, heavy centers who stood near the basket and waited for the ball. Instead, he ran. He sprinted up and down the court like a guard. He shot from the outside like a small forward. He passed the ball like a point guard. He dove on the floor for loose balls like nobody cared about his body at all. He mixed speed, smarts, and pure effort into something the league had never quite seen at his size. When Dave Cowens was honored at the Basketball Hall of Fame in 1991, he said something that fans still remember. He said he was not a normal superstar. He called himself part of the working class of the NBA. He said he could think of plenty of players who had more natural talent than he did. That single idea explains everything about how Cowens saw the game. He never measured greatness by how flashy a player looked or how many points showed up on the scoreboard. He measured it by effort, by defense, by teamwork, and by what a player gave up of himself to help his team win. Because of this, Cowens never sat down and gave the world a simple list of his all-time greatest players. He did not do interviews where he ranked stars from 1 to 10 like a countdown show. Instead, his true opinions about greatness live inside his career. They live inside the things he said about teammates and rivals. They live inside the way he played the game every single night. If you want to know who Dave Cowens believed were the greatest players ever, you have to look at his story, not a press conference. Picture the way Cowens actually played the game, because it explains everything that comes next. Most centers in his era stood near the basket and waited. Cowens never waited for anything. He would grab a defensive rebound and take off down the floor himself, pushing the ball ahead like a guard while bigger men were still turning around to find the play. He would step out past the free throw line and knock down a clean jump shot, something almost no center in his time bothered to try. On defense, he switched onto smaller, faster players without complaint, trusting his own quickness to keep up. None of this came easily. It came from hours of conditioning, stubborn pride, and a refusal to ever let his size become an excuse. That is the lens Cowens used to judge every other player in the league, including the legends we are about to talk about. So that is exactly what we are going to do. We are going to walk through the players who shaped Cowens, tested him, and earned his deepest respect. Each one taught him something different about what real greatness looks like on a basketball court. None of them were chosen because they were famous. They were chosen because they were great in ways that mattered to a man who valued sweat over style. The first name on this list is the man who made Dave Cowens possible in the first place. His name is Bill Russell, and to Cowens, he was the highest standard anyone could ever reach. Bill Russell was the center who built the entire Celtics dynasty. Before Cowens ever wore a Celtics uniform, Russell had already won 11 championships in 13 seasons. Think about that number for a second. 11 championships. No player in basketball history has come close to matching it. When Russell finally retired in 1969, the Celtics fell apart almost overnight. The team that had been unstoppable for over a decade dropped all the way down to a losing record. That collapse proved something important. It proved that Russell's value was never about how many points he scored. His value was about everything else he gave the team, especially on defense, and about how the whole team crumbled the moment he was gone. Cowens believed in that lesson with his whole heart. He always said that the best way to measure a player's true value was to imagine removing him from his team and watching what happened next. If the team fell apart without him, that player was truly great. If the team barely noticed, that player was good but not great. By that measuring stick, nobody in basketball history stood taller than Bill Russell. There is another story that connects Russell and Cowens even more closely. Before the 1970 draft, Red Auerbach, the legendary Celtics general manager, was trying to decide whether to take a chance on a tough, red-haired kid out of Florida State named Dave Cowens. Auerbach turned to Russell for advice, since Russell understood the center position better than almost anyone alive. Cowens went through a tryout, battling and grinding through every drill with total intensity. Russell watched closely. After seeing Cowens fight his way through the paint, Russell turned to Auerbach and said that no one was going to tell that kid he could not play center, no matter what the measuring tape said about his height. That one sentence from Russell helped seal Cowens' future in the NBA. It was a passing of the torch before Cowens had ever played a single professional game. Russell saw something in Cowens that mattered more than inches. He saw heart, motor, and toughness. Those were the same qualities Russell had used to win all those championships himself. Cowens carried that lesson with him for his entire career. He played defense like his life depended on it. He led the league in defensive win shares, which is a way of measuring how much a player's defense helps his team win games. In both 1973 and 1976, he averaged over 13 rebounds a game across his career, fighting bigger men every single night for position under the basket. None of that came from natural size. It came from the same competitive fire that Russell had passed down to him before they ever shared a locker room. Think about how steep that fall really was. The Celtics had been the best team in basketball for over a decade. The moment Russell walked away, that same team dropped all the way down to 34 wins in a single season. No new player came in and replaced Russell. No new system fixed the problem right away. The team simply lost its anchor, and everyone could see it on the scoreboard. That fall is exactly why Cowens trusted Russell's advice so completely when he arrived as a rookie, trying to fill that same enormous role. He did not try to be a copy of Russell. He simply borrowed the same core idea, that defense and winning come before everything else, and built his own game on top of it. To Cowens, Russell was not just the greatest winner in basketball history. Russell was proof that defense, sacrifice, and team focus mattered more than personal glory. Every other player on this list gets measured, at least a little, against the standard that Russell set. The next name comes from somebody Cowens saw every single day for years. His name is John Havlicek, and Cowens called him a player who could never truly be replaced. John Havlicek played alongside Cowens for 8 seasons in Boston. He served as a bridge between two eras, connecting the old championship teams led by Russell to the new championship teams led by Cowens. Havlicek was the kind of player who never seemed to stop moving. While other players walked back on defense or stood still waiting for a pass, Havlicek was always running, always cutting, always working his way toward open space. That endless motion was the secret to his greatness. Havlicek wore defenders down simply by never letting them rest. He ran through screens set by his teammates, sprinted to the corners, sprinted back to the middle, and somehow still had the legs left to knock down a clean jump shot at the end of all that running. Cowens loved this about him. He saw Havlicek as proof that conditioning and effort could be just as deadly as raw talent. What made this even more impressive to Cowens was how quiet Havlicek stayed about it. He did not demand the ball every time down the floor. He did not sulk if a shot did not come his way for a few possessions. He trusted that his constant movement would eventually create an open look. And more often than not, he was right. That patience paired with non-stop energy is a hard combination to find in any player at any level of the sport. When Havlicek finally retired in 1978, Cowens wrote a tribute to him. In that tribute, Cowens said that someone else would eventually take Havlicek's spot on the roster, but nobody would ever truly replace him. That single line says everything about how much respect Cowens had for his longtime teammate. Havlicek was not the loudest or flashiest star on the team. He simply showed up every single night and did his job at the highest level, year after year, for 16 seasons. The numbers back up everything Cowens believed about him. Havlicek won 8 championships in his career. He made 13 All-Star teams. He earned 8 selections to the All-Defensive team, proving he was just as committed on defense as he was on offense. He also picked up 11 All-NBA selections across his career, a sign that league observers, not just his own coaches, recognized just how steady and complete his game truly was. For Cowens, that kind of long-term two-way greatness mattered more than any single highlight reel ever could. Now we move to a name that many casual fans might not expect to see on a list like this. His name is Paul Silas, and Cowens called him the greatest rebounder he ever played alongside. Paul Silas joined the Celtics in 1972. He was not a big scorer. He was not the kind of player who showed up on highlight shows or got his face on magazine covers. What Silas did was harder to notice, but it was just as important. He boxed out bigger men. He fought through traffic to grab loose balls. He protected the defensive glass with a kind of stubborn toughness that made everyone around him better. Because Silas controlled the boards so well, Cowens was free to gamble on defense. Cowens could leave his man early, double-team a scorer, and trust that Silas would clean up the rebound if things went wrong. This partnership turned the Celtics into a fast-breaking machine. During the 1972 to 1973 season, with Silas anchoring the boards and Cowens flying around the court, the Celtics finished with a league best record of 68 wins and only 14 losses. That kind of record does not happen by accident. It happens because every part of the team is doing its job, including the parts that never show up in the box score. This is exactly why Cowens valued Silas so highly. Silas's true impact could not be measured just by counting his points or even his rebounds. His impact showed up in how exhausted the other team's forwards felt by the fourth quarter. It showed up in the extra possessions his team earned because he refused to let a loose ball bounce away. Cowens understood that kind of hidden value better than almost anyone in the league, because Cowens played the same way himself. Silas stood beside Cowens during the championship runs of 1974 and 1976. He was never the headline. He was the foundation that let the headline happen. Across his long career, Silas played over 1,200 games, grabbed more than 12,000 rebounds, and still found time to win 3 championships, even though he was rarely the player drawing the biggest crowds. For Cowens, that made him one of the truly great players of his era, even if the rest of the basketball world never gave him quite enough credit. The next player on this list arrived near the very end of Cowens' playing career, but he made an impression fast enough to change how Cowens felt about the future of his team. His name is Larry Bird. Cowens only played 1 full season alongside Larry Bird during the 1979 to 1980 season. That is not a long time, Most players need years to truly understand a teammate's game. Cowens did not need years. He saw what Bird could become almost immediately. Years later, Cowens said plainly that Bird had everything it took to become an outstanding player. That praise meant something coming from Cowens, because Cowens was known for having very little patience for lazy defense or selfish play. He did not hand out compliments easily, but Bird earned it. Bird could pass like a point guard, rebound like a power forward, shoot from anywhere on the floor, and read the game with a kind of intelligence that most players never develop. Cowens recognized that combination right away, because in many ways it reminded him of his own game. During the 1977 to 1978 season, Cowens had pulled off something extremely rare. He led his entire team in points, rebounds, assists, blocks, and steals, all in the same season. That kind of complete all-around production is almost impossible to find in one player. When Cowens looked at Bird, he saw a younger version of that same complete style, except with even more raw skill behind it. This connection between Cowens and Bird matters for another reason too. Cowens retired early during the 1980 to 1981 season. He did not retire because he had nothing left to give. He retired because he believed the young core of players around him, especially Bird, along with Robert Parrish and rookie Kevin McHale, were fully ready to carry the Celtics forward without him. Cowens trusted Bird enough to walk away from the game knowing his team was in good hands. That trust says more about how highly Cowens valued Bird than almost any stat ever could. Bird went on to prove that trust was earned many times over. He finished his career averaging better than 24 points, 10 rebounds, and 6 assists a game, numbers that match almost exactly the kind of complete, every category production Cowens always admired most. He won 3 championships of his own and made 12 All-Star teams. For a player Cowens only shared a locker room with for a single season, that legacy speaks volumes about how quickly Cowens could spot the real thing when he saw it. Now we arrive at the rivalry that defined an entire decade of basketball, and the player Cowens respected as the toughest test he ever faced. His name is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Kareem stood nearly 7 feet 2 inches tall without shoes. Cowens stood 6 feet 9. That gap might not sound huge on paper, but on a basketball court, against a player with Kareem's skill, it was enormous. Kareem had the skyhook, a shot that seemed impossible to block no matter how hard defenders tried. He had length, scoring touch, and a competitive edge that never seemed to fade, no matter how many years passed. Across his career, Kareem scored more than 38,000 points and grabbed over 17,000 rebounds, numbers built across 2 full decades of dominance that almost no other player has ever matched. Their battles defined the 1970s. Year after year, Cowens had to figure out a way to slow down a man who was bigger, longer, and arguably more skilled than him in almost every measurable way. Cowens never had the size to match Kareem, so he used everything else he had instead. He used speed. He used smart double teams. He used non-stop hustle that wore down even a player as dominant as Kareem over the course of a long physical game. The peak of this rivalry came during the 1972 to 1973 season. That year, the league's players voted for Most Valuable Player, and they chose Dave Cowens over Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Cowens earned 68 first-place votes compared to Kareem's 33. On paper, this surprises a lot of modern fans, because Kareem's scoring numbers that season were incredible, averaging over 30 points a game on excellent shooting, while Cowens averaged just over 20 points a game on a lower shooting percentage. But the players who voted that year were not just looking at scoring totals. They were looking at leadership, defense, and the fact that Cowens had pushed his Celtics to a league-best 68-win season. The players who battled against Cowens every night understood his value in a way that simple stat sheets could never fully capture. That respect went both directions, and it never faded as the years passed. Kareem himself later called Cowens one of the greatest competitors he ever faced, saying that Cowens never gave anything less than his absolute best on a single possession. That is an enormous compliment, especially coming from a man who faced nearly every great center in basketball history during his own long career. The biggest moment between them came during the 1974 NBA Finals. Cowens' Celtics faced Kareem's Milwaukee Bucks in a brutal 7-game series. Using his speed, his outside shooting, and relentless double teams, Cowens helped Boston pull off the upset, beating a team built around one of the most dominant big men the sport had ever seen. The series stretched the full 7 games, with both centers playing through fatigue and physical punishment that would have worn down almost any other player in the league. To Cowens, Kareem was the mountain. He never tried to avoid that mountain or shrink away from the challenge. He simply put his head down and climbed it, game after game, year after year. That kind of respect between two fierce rivals is rare in any sport, and it tells you everything about how much Cowens valued true greatness, even when that greatness was standing directly across from him trying to beat his team. The next name brings us into the backcourt where Cowens admired a different kind of complete game. His name is Oscar Robertson, often called simply the Big O. Oscar Robertson set a standard for all-around basketball that very few players have ever matched. During the 1961 to 1962 season, he averaged a triple-double for the entire year, meaning he averaged at least 10 points, 10 rebounds, and 10 assists per game across the whole season. To this day, that achievement remains one of the most remarkable feats in basketball history. Cowens faced an older version of Robertson during the 1974 NBA Finals. By that point in his career, Robertson had slowed down a little from his absolute physical peak, but his control over the game had not faded at all. Cowens watched firsthand how Robertson used strength, smart passing, and veteran scoring instincts to control the pace of an entire series, even though he was no longer the fastest or most explosive player on the floor. For Cowens, Robertson represented something close to the ideal model of backcourt play. He was not just a scorer. He was not just a passer. He combined scoring, passing, and rebounding into one complete package, long before people started using fancy modern terms to describe players who could do everything at once. Across his career, Robertson scored more than 26,000 points and handed out nearly 10,000 assists, numbers that still rank among the best any guard has ever produced. Cowens believed that Robertson's style of all-around production set the blueprint that future generations of complete players, including stars like Bird, would eventually follow. When you put these names together, a clear pattern starts to form. Cowens did not just respect scoring, he respected complete, winning basketball. Let's walk through the numbers quickly. Not as a boring stat lesson, but as a simple way to understand just how different and special each of these careers truly was. None of these players reached greatness the exact same way, and that is exactly the point. Cowens never looked for a single formula for greatness. He looked for different paths that all arrived at the same destination, which was winning basketball games the right way. Bill Russell won 11 championships, a number that may never be matched again in NBA history, and he did it almost entirely through defense and team play rather than personal scoring. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar scored more points than almost any player who ever lived, finishing his career with 38,387 points. And he stayed at an elite level for an unbelievably long time, winning 6 championships along the way. John Havlicek combined non-stop energy with steady scoring across 16 seasons, winning 8 championships and making 13 All-Star teams, proving that motion and conditioning could carry a player to greatness just as much as pure talent. Larry Bird brought elite passing, smart rebounding, and deadly shooting together in one player, winning 3 championships and becoming exactly the kind of complete star that Cowens predicted he would be from the very first season they shared a locker room. Oscar Robertson produced numbers that still amaze people today, averaging a triple-double for an entire season and finishing his career with nearly 10,000 assists, a total built on pure court vision and control. Paul Silas never put up huge scoring numbers, but his rebounding and physical toughness made everything around him work better, helping his teams win 3 championships across his long career. And Dave Cowens himself, despite being undersized for his position, won the league MVP award, captured 2 championships, averaged over 13 rebounds a game for his career, and led the league in defensive win shares twice, proving that heart and effort could compete with size and pure talent at the highest level of the sport. There is one more set of numbers worth mentioning, because it shows just how seriously defense mattered to this whole group of players. Basketball researchers use a number called win shares to estimate how much a player helped his team win games across his entire career, counting both offense and defense together. Russell finished his career with over 160 win shares, an incredible total considering how much of his value came from defense alone. Kareem finished with the highest total of the group, over 270 win shares, built across 20 long seasons of staying near the top of the league. Robertson finished close behind him with nearly 190 win shares, almost entirely thanks to his all-around backcourt production. Bird, despite a career cut short by injuries, still finished with close to 146 win shares. Havlicek finished around 120 win shares across his 16 seasons. Cowens himself finished with just under 107 win shares, an outstanding total for a player who spent his whole career being physically undersized at his position. Silas finished a bit lower, around 97 win shares, which makes sense for a player who rarely scored in bunches, but his number still reflects real, lasting value built almost entirely through defense and rebounding. Even the smaller defensive numbers tell the same story. Cowens averaged nearly 10 defensive rebounds a game across his career, an extremely high number for a man his size. Silas averaged almost 8 defensive rebounds a game himself, which explains exactly why Cowens trusted him so deeply on the defensive end. Bird, despite being known mostly for his offense, still averaged more than 8 defensive rebounds a game and nearly 2 steals a game at his peak, proving once again just how complete his game truly was. Every single player on this list, no matter how they are remembered by casual fans today, shared one quiet habit in common. They all worked just as hard on the end of the floor where nobody scores. Each of these players brought something different to the floor. Some scored in bunches, some controlled the boards, some passed with elite vision, some simply refused to ever stop moving. But all of them shared one thing in common that Cowens valued above everything else. They made the people around them better, and they helped their teams win. That same belief carried Cowens long after his playing days ended, all the way into a much later chapter of his basketball life, when he became a head coach. In 1996, Cowens was coaching the Charlotte Hornets on draft night. The Hornets used their pick to select a talented but very young guard straight out of high school named Kobe Bryant. Almost immediately, the team turned around and traded Bryant away to the Los Angeles Lakers. Years later, Bryant revealed exactly what Cowens had told him that night. Cowens explained in blunt terms that Charlotte had no real use for a raw teenage guard who needed years of development. The team wanted proven, established veterans who could help them win right away. For a young player who already believed deeply in his own talent, hearing that kind of honest rejection from a respected former MVP and two-time champion stung. But Bryant later said that exact moment became part of the fuel that drove him for the rest of his career. That story tells us something important about how Cowens thought about basketball greatness. Talent alone was never enough for him. A player had to prove that talent could turn into immediate physical contributions that helped a team win games right now, not just someday in the future. It did not matter how much potential a young player carried inside him. What mattered to Cowens was what that player could give his team on that very night, in that very game. This was not Cowens being cruel or careless with a young player's feelings. It was simply the same hard standard he had always held for himself. Nobody had handed Cowens anything when he entered the league either. He had to prove possession by possession that a player without the typical size for his position could still help a team win immediately. He never expected any less from the players who came after him, even a player as talented as a teenage Kobe Bryant. In a strange way, that blunt honesty became one of the greatest gifts Cowens ever gave him, even though neither of them could have known it at the time. This same demanding standard connected Cowens to a much later group of Celtics players known as the Floor Burn Team, a group that famously included a tough, hustling guard named Marcus Smart many years after Cowens had retired. The name fits perfectly because it describes players who are willing to dive across the floor for a loose ball, scrape up their knees and elbows, and give up their bodies without a second thought, all in the name of winning a single possession. Cowens lived by that exact same code during his entire playing career, long before anyone ever attached a nickname to it. It is a fitting piece of history that a franchise built around Bill Russell's quiet defensive sacrifice and Cowens' non-stop hustle would still be praising that same kind of toughness generations later. So when you put the whole picture together, you start to understand exactly how Dave Cowens judged greatness. He respected Bill Russell because Russell proved that defense and winning mattered more than personal scoring. He respected John Havlicek because Havlicek proved that non-stop effort and preparation could define an entire career. He respected Paul Silas because Silas proved that the most important work on a basketball court does not always show up on a stat sheet. He respected Larry Bird because Bird proved that passing, rebounding, and scoring could all live inside one complete, winning player. He respected Kareem Abdul-Jabbar because Kareem forced him to fight for every single inch of the court, and Cowens never once backed down from that fight. And he respected Oscar Robertson because Robertson showed the entire league what total, complete basketball mastery could look like decades before most fans even had the words to describe it. None of these names are surprising once you understand the man doing the choosing. Dave Cowens never cared much about fame, flashy highlights, or huge personal scoring totals. He cared about winning. he cared about defense. He cared about toughness, hustle, and the willingness to do the hard, unglamorous work that most fans never notice but every great teammate always appreciates. That is why his version of basketball greatness looks a little different from the usual highlight reel countdowns you might see elsewhere. His list is built from real respect earned through real battles, real teamwork, and real championships, not from marketing or popularity. Dave Cowan spent his career as the working-class superstar of the NBA, a player who outworked far more talented men on a nightly basis. So when Cowans decided that a player deserved his respect, that respect meant something. It meant that player had truly earned it through effort, sacrifice, and a genuine commitment to winning above everything else. In the end, the players who made Dave Cowans want to retire were never really his enemies at all. Looking back, they were the players who pushed him to become the best version of himself. Bill Russell gave him a blueprint for defense and winning before his career had even started. John Havlicek showed him what relentless effort looked like up close, every single day in practice and in games. Paul Silas gave him the freedom to play aggressive defense by protecting the boards behind him, without ever complaining about the credit he deserved but rarely received. Larry Bird gave him confidence that the Celtics would remain great long after he walked away from the game for good. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar gave him the toughest test of his entire career, year after year, and never once let him feel comfortable. And Oscar Robertson gave him a clear picture of what total basketball mastery actually looked like in real time, right there on the court in front of him. Dave Cowans respected winners. He respected workers. He respected defenders, rebounders, passers, and competitors who refused to quit no matter how the score looked. His list of greatness tells us just as much about who Dave Cowans was as it tells us about the legends who earned his respect. He was humble enough to praise the men who battled him hardest. He was tough enough to compete with every single one of them, night after night, for an entire career. And he was smart enough to understand that real basketball greatness was never just about what showed up in a highlight reel or a box score. It was about effort. It was about sacrifice. It was about showing up every single night and giving everything you had for the team standing beside you. That is the standard Dave Cowans lived by. And that is the standard he used to judge the greatest players he ever saw. In the end, that might be the most valuable lesson his entire career has left behind for the rest of us to learn. Think about how rare that kind of standard really is. In a sport that often rewards the loudest highlight or the biggest scoring night, Cowans chose to measure greatness by something quieter and harder to see. He looked for the player who dove for the loose ball nobody else wanted. He looked for the player who set the screen that nobody noticed but that freed up the open shot. He looked for the player who kept running on tired legs in the fourth quarter when the easier choice would have been to slow down. That is not a flashy way to judge basketball. It is a fair way and it is an honest one. And it came from a man who lived every single one of those moments himself, night after night, for an entire career. That honesty is exactly why his respect carried so much weight. When Dave Cowans looked across the court at Bill Russell, John Havlicek, Paul Silas, Larry Bird, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Oscar Robertson, he was not handing out empty praise. He was recognizing the very same qualities he tried to bring to the floor himself, reflected back at him through 6 different careers, 6 different styles, and 6 different paths to greatness. That is what makes this list worth remembering. It was never about fame. It was always about respect. Earned the hard way, possession by possession, season after season.
Up and under, blocked by Duncan.
How did you feel about that?
A fabulous alley-oop.
NBA champions.
He's my GOAT. That is the kind of phrase you expect a basketball legend to throw around. But when Tim Duncan finally named 7 of his absolute favorite players of all time, something felt off. The list did not look the way people imagined it would. There were no picks built around the flashiest names in the game. There were no choices made just to please a crowd. Instead, the list was quiet. It was thoughtful. And it pointed to something far deeper than scoring titles or highlight reels. Tim Duncan is widely considered the greatest power forward in basketball history. For 19 long seasons, he played for one team, and one team only, the San Antonio Spurs. He won 5 championships. He helped build a dynasty that changed the way teams think about culture and winning. Yet through all of it, he stayed calm, humble, and almost invisible off the court. He did not chase fame. He did not throw out hot takes. He rarely gave public rankings of other players during his playing days. So when a man like that finally opens up and names his favorites, you have to pay attention, because his choices are not random. They are a window into how he sees the game. They reveal what he truly believes makes a player great. If you're enjoying this breakdown already, make sure to hit the hype feature and give this video some hype as we uncover what Tim Duncan's choices really reveal. Trust me, the deeper we go, the more these 7 names start to make sense. Here's the big question we are going to answer today. What do these 7 players reveal about how Tim Duncan viewed greatness? Because once you understand his picks, you understand the mind of one of the smartest players who ever lived, and that mind is far more interesting than any list of names could ever be on its own. Most fans would expect a legend to fill his list with the biggest scorers and the most exciting dunkers. That is what sells. That is what fills highlight reels. But Duncan never cared about any of that. His 7 picks are a mix of historical giants, childhood idols, modern masters, and the teammates who stood beside him through it all. Each one was chosen for a reason, and by the time we reach the end, you will see that not a single name on this list is there by accident. Every choice is a clue. Every choice points back to the same quiet set of beliefs that guided his entire career. Let us start with who Tim Duncan really was. People called him the big fundamental. The name fit him perfectly. He did not rely on tricks. He did not need flash. He just did the simple things better than anyone else, over and over, for almost 20 years. He won 5 championships with the Spurs. He played all 19 of his seasons with the same franchise, in a sport where stars often move from team to team chasing rings and money. Duncan stayed loyal to one home. What made him stand out even more was how little he cared about being famous. Many superstars love the spotlight. They build their brands. They argue about who is the best. They give interviews full of bold opinions. Duncan did almost none of that. He rarely made public player rankings. He did not run big media campaigns built around himself. He let his game do the talking, and his game spoke louder than words ever could. This is exactly why his opinions carry so much weight. When a loud player names his favorites, you wonder if he is just chasing attention. But when a quiet man like Duncan finally speaks, you know he means it. He is not performing. He is not trying to go viral. He is simply telling you what he truly admires. And that honesty is rare. You also have to remember just how much he accomplished while staying so quiet. 5 championships is a mountain that very few players ever climb. 19 seasons with a single team is almost unheard of in the modern game. He helped pile up well over 1,000 regular season wins for the Spurs. He took an entire franchise and turned it into a model of how to win the right way. And he did all of it, without ever needing to tell you how great he was. The trophies spoke, the wins spoke. The respect of his peers spoke. He never had to. At 49 years old, Duncan finally gave us that window. He named 7 players he considers his absolute favorites. The group is a mix. There are historical giants. There are childhood idols. There are modern masters. And there are teammates who defined his career. At first, it might look like a strange collection, but once you look closer, you start to see a pattern. Every single pick reflects the same set of values: elite skill, relentless effort, emotional control, and a deep belief in the team over the individual. To understand why Duncan thinks this way, we have to go back to the very beginning, because his story does not start on a basketball court at all. It starts in the water. Before he was a basketball legend, Tim Duncan was a swimmer. And not just any swimmer. He was one of the best young swimmers in the United States Virgin Islands. His path looked set. He was built for the pool, not the hardwood. But life had other plans. A powerful hurricane swept through and destroyed his local training facilities. Suddenly, the place where he trained was gone. That single event changed everything. With swimming taken away from him, Duncan turned to a different sport. He picked up a basketball, and slowly that new sport became his future. It is a powerful reminder that sometimes the biggest turns in life come from things we never planned. Duncan did not choose basketball at first. Basketball found him after his first dream was washed away. From there, his journey led him to Wake Forest. And this is where the second part of his character really took shape. Most top prospects today rush through college. They play one season, or even skip college entirely, and jump straight to the pros to chase money. Duncan did the opposite. By the end of his second year, he was already projected as the clear first overall pick. He could have left right then and become rich. Almost anyone would have. But Duncan stayed. He stayed all 4 years. He did it to keep a promise to his late mother. He had promised her that he would graduate, and no amount of fame or money was going to break that promise, so he finished school. He earned his degree, and only then did he move on to the next chapter. Think about what that choice tells you. It tells you about discipline. It tells you about patience. It tells you about a young man who thought about the long term instead of the quick reward. He was willing to wait. He was willing to keep his word. He was willing to grow fully before stepping into the spotlight. These are not just nice habits. These are the exact values that would later shape who he admired most. There is also a hidden gift in that decision. By staying 4 full years, Duncan did not enter the league as a raw, unfinished talent. He entered as a complete player. He had time to learn. He had time to mature. He had time to sharpen every part of his game before the bright lights ever found him. Many young stars arrive full of talent but short on polish. Duncan arrived as a finished product. He was disciplined, fully formed, and ready to win from his very first day. That patience gave him an edge that lasted his entire career. When Duncan finally entered the professional ranks in 1997, he walked into a wild world. The league at that time was full of bold, expressive individual stars. Players like Allen Iverson, Kevin Garnett, Latrell Sprewell, and Stephon Marbury brought huge personalities to the court. The whole era was loud and full of attitude. On top of that, the game was dominated by the massive physical force of Shaquille O'Neal. Into all of this stepped Tim Duncan, calm, quiet, disciplined. He was almost the complete opposite of everything around him. Some people described him like a classical clarinetist walking into a circle of modern rap artists. He just did not fit the mood of the moment, and yet that difference became his greatest strength. San Antonio welcomed his disciplined approach with open arms. Under the coaching of Greg Popovich, Duncan became the perfect centerpiece of an unusual franchise. The Spurs did not want loud. They wanted steady, they wanted smart, they wanted team first. And Duncan was the living example of all of it. The system and the player matched perfectly. That match would go on to build one of the greatest dynasties the game has ever seen. Now that we understand who Duncan was, let us finally dig into his 7 favorite players. And the first one takes us all the way back to his childhood. The first name on the list is Magic Johnson. When Tim Duncan first fell in love with basketball, Magic was his favorite player. And that is a fascinating detail because of what Duncan wanted to be back then. When he first picked up the sport, he did not dream of being a giant in the paint. He wanted to play point guard. He wanted to be the one running the show, setting up teammates, controlling the flow of the game. Then his body changed. A growth spurt pushed him taller and taller. Soon he was far too big to play point guard. He was pushed into the front court, into the world of centers and power forwards. But here's the beautiful part. Even though his body changed, his mind never did. He never lost that point guard way of thinking. He still saw the floor like a playmaker. He still wanted to set up his teammates. That is the gift Magic Johnson gave him. Duncan became a rare kind of big man, one who could pass and create like a guard. He served as an incredible high-to-low facilitator. Nowhere was this clearer than in the 2014 season, when the Spurs played some of the most beautiful, pass-heavy basketball the league had ever seen. The ball moved. Teammates got open. And at the heart of it was a big man who still thought like the point guard he once dreamed of being. And here's the part that makes it special. Magic Johnson himself noticed. Magic has said that Duncan became one of his own favorite players. Why? Because Duncan's game was always about winning and lifting up his team, not about boosting his own numbers. The respect flowed both ways. The childhood idol grew to admire the student, and the lesson at the center of it all was simple. True greatness means making your teammates better. That was Duncan's very first lesson in basketball leadership, and he carried it for life. It is worth pausing on just how rare that connection is. A young boy grows up idolizing one of the greatest players ever. Then he grows up, builds his own legendary career, and that same idol turns around and names him as a favorite in return. Magic was a 5-time champion and a 3-time most valuable player. He was the very picture of winning basketball. And the thing he admired in Duncan was the same thing Duncan had quietly learned from watching him as a child. The circle was complete. The student had honored the teacher in the best way possible by living the lesson. The second name takes us to defense, and to a man Duncan respected as much as anyone who ever lived. That man is Bill Russell. Duncan has called Russell one of his favorite players and one of his favorite human beings of all time. That is high praise. It is not just about basketball, it is about character. On the court, the link between Russell and Duncan is clear. Both men anchored historic defenses, but they did not do it by jumping out of the gym or chasing flashy blocks. They did it with their minds. They did it with positioning. They read the game before it happened. Russell changed the way rim protection worked. He did not need wild, gambling blocks to dominate. He used smarts and timing, and Duncan mirrored that exact same approach all through his career. The numbers back this up in a powerful way. During Duncan's prime, from 1998 to 2009, the average defensive rating across the league sat around 105.1. The Spurs, meanwhile, held a historic mark of 99.2. That is nearly 6 full points better than the rest of the league. That kind of gap does not happen by accident. It happens when a defense is built on discipline, intelligence, and a leader who controls everything quietly from the inside. There was also a shared way of carrying themselves. Both Russell and Duncan had an unshakable calm. They did not trash talk. They did not need to. They preferred quiet execution. They let their defense do the shouting. And the message Russell passed down to Duncan was clear. Championships are built on defense and emotional discipline. Stay calm, stay smart, lock down your end of the floor, and the winning will follow. This became the heart of Duncan's own defensive identity. And remember the kind of resume Russell built with that exact approach. He was an 11-time champion and a 5-time most valuable player. No one in the history of the sport won more. Yet, he did it all without ever putting on a show. He won with his mind, his timing, and his control. That is the model Duncan chose to follow. Not the flashiest, not the loudest. The one who simply won more than anyone, by mastering the parts of the game that do not show up on a highlight reel. The third favorite jumps all the way to the present day. It is Nikola Jokic of the Denver Nuggets. Out of all the active players in the game right now, Jokic is the one Duncan has gone out of his way to praise. Duncan called him a lot of fun to watch, and he pointed directly to 2 things he loves about Jokic's game: his creative footwork and his passing. This pick says a lot about Duncan. The modern game is full of perimeter shooting and high-flying isolation plays. So much of today's basketball happens far from the basket. But Jokic is different. Jokic plays a thinking man's game in the post. He represents the modern version of the cerebral point center, a big man who controls everything with his brain instead of just his body. If that sounds familiar, it should. It is almost a mirror of Duncan himself. Like Duncan, Jokic leans on low post fundamentals. Like Duncan, he uses high to low passing to pick defenses apart. Like Duncan, he sets screens and controls the tempo of the whole game. They share a way of playing that puts intelligence above athleticism. And once again, the respect flows both ways. Jokic has said that he models his own offensive approach after Duncan. He even hopes to build a long-term dynasty-style impact in Denver, much like the one Duncan built in San Antonio. So this pick is more than just one legend liking a current star. It is proof of something Duncan deeply believes. Basketball intelligence never goes out of style. The game may change its fashions, but smart, skilled post play always finds a way to win. It also shows that Duncan watches the modern game with an open mind. He is not a man stuck in the past, grumbling that things were better in his day. He sees Jokic, a 3-time most valuable player and a champion in his own right, and he celebrates him. He sees the footwork, the vision, the creativity, and he recognizes a kindred spirit. The postgame he loves is still alive, just wearing a new jersey. And that gives Duncan a quiet joy, because it means the things he valued most are not gone. They are simply being carried forward by a new generation. Now we move to the player who shaped Duncan's career more directly than anyone else. That player is David Robinson. When Duncan arrived in San Antonio back in 1997, he did not walk into an empty team. He walked into a team that already had a giant. Robinson was already an established superstar. He was a former league MVP. He was the face of the franchise. In most stories, this is where the trouble starts. A young star arrives and the old star feels threatened. Egos clash, the team splits. But that is not what happened in San Antonio. Robinson did the opposite of what most stars would do. Instead of resisting the talented rookie, he welcomed him. He willingly stepped back from the offensive spotlight. He made room. And together, the two of them formed one of the most famous duos in league history, the Twin Towers. That single act of sacrifice set the tone for everything that came after. It created the baseline for the Spurs team-first culture. It showed everyone in the building what mattered most. Not personal stats, not personal fame. Just winning together, and win they did. Together, Duncan and Robinson captured championships in 1999 and again in 2003. The first title in 1999 came during a shortened lockout season with David Robinson and Avery Johnson by Duncan's side, and they took down the New York Knicks. Duncan was named Finals MVP. The second title in 2003 was even more meaningful for Robinson. It came against the New Jersey Nets, with a young Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili now part of the group. It was Duncan's second MVP and second Finals MVP, and it was Robinson's final season, a perfect way for the veteran to ride off into retirement. What Robinson taught Duncan goes beyond basketball. He proved that true leadership is not about protecting your status. It is about building something that lasts. The smooth handover of power from Robinson to Duncan showed that real strength comes from stability and from putting the team above your own ego. True leaders do not cling to the throne. They raise up the person who comes next. Robinson created a successor instead of fearing one, and that lesson became part of the Spurs' DNA forever. It is hard to put into words how unusual this was. Robinson was not some role player making space for a star. He was a former most valuable player at the very top of the league. He had every reason to guard his place fiercely. Instead, he chose humility. He chose the team. He took a young rookie under his wing and helped turn him into the next great Spur. That choice did not weaken Robinson. It made him a champion twice over, and it made the entire franchise stronger for decades. Duncan watched all of this happen up close. He learned that the truest sign of greatness is the willingness to share it. As Robinson stepped into retirement, a new core took shape. Duncan now stood alongside two players who would help him build the next wave of greatness: Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili. Together, the three of them became known as the Big Three, and the bond they built was incredible. They won 4 championships together. They played an astonishing 1,214 regular season games side by side. That kind of long-term partnership almost never happens in modern sports. Let us look at Tony Parker first. Parker brought something Duncan did not have: blazing speed and elite paint penetration. He could slice into the defense in a blink, and that speed paired perfectly with Duncan's size and skill. Together, they formed one of the most lethal pick-and-roll partnerships the game has ever seen. Parker would dart toward the basket and force the defense to collapse. Duncan would be there, steady and sure, ready to finish or make the right pass. This is the lesson Parker represents. Greatness is amplified through partnership. Duncan was already brilliant on his own, but paired with the right partner, he became even more dangerous. Parker did not just play next to Duncan. He made Duncan better, and Duncan made him better in return. Their chemistry lasted for years and carried the Spurs through title after title. It was proof that two great players who fit together can become far more than the sum of their parts. Then there's Manu Ginobili, and his story might be the most selfless of them all. Ginobili was bursting with talent. He brought unpredictable creativity. He brought fearlessness. He brought a kind of wild energy that defenses could never quite figure out. On top of that, he played with real defensive intensity. By talent alone, he could have demanded a starting spot on almost any team in the league, but Ginobili made a choice that says everything about the Spurs culture. He accepted a bench role. He became a sixth man. He did this to keep the team's rotations balanced and to give the group the best chance to win. Think about that. A player good enough to start, choosing to come off the bench simply because it helped the team. That is an enormous sacrifice of personal recognition and pride. And that is exactly why Duncan admired him so much. Ginobili put team success above personal awards. He gave up the spotlight that he had earned, all for the good of the group. This willingness to sacrifice is the very thing that defined the Spurs for over a decade. It is why both Ginobili and Parker stand among Duncan's favorite partners. They lived the same values Duncan held dearest: win first, ego last. When you look at what the three of them built together, the bond becomes even more impressive. 4 championships, more than 1,200 regular season games side by side. That is not luck, that is loyalty. That is 3 players choosing each other, year after year, instead of chasing bigger roles somewhere else. Parker could have demanded the ball more. Ginobili could have demanded a starting spot. Both of them chose the team instead. And that is the exact spirit that runs through every name on Duncan's list. He did not just admire talent, he admired people who used their talent to win together. The next favorite represents the final chapter of the Spurs dynasty. His name is Kawhi Leonard. Leonard and Duncan played together for 5 years, and in that time, they formed a deeply disciplined defensive frontcourt. They locked teams down. They made scoring against the Spurs feel like running into a brick wall, night after night. The peak of this partnership came in the 2014 Finals. That year, Leonard's efficient scoring and lockdown defense earned him the Finals MVP award as the Spurs defeated the Miami Heat. It was a stunning moment, a young, quiet player rising to the very top stage and shining bright. And the way he did it felt deeply familiar. Leonard's quiet, business-like approach to the game mirrored Duncan's own entry into the league. Remember how Duncan arrived? Calm, humble, focused, no noise, just work. Leonard was the same. He let his play speak. He did not chase attention. He simply did his job at an elite level. In Leonard, Duncan saw the next generation of Spurs values come to life. He saw a new star finding success by adopting the same fundamental ideals that had built the franchise. This is why Kawhi mattered so much to Duncan. It was not about replacement. It was about continuity. Duncan did not see Leonard as the man taking his place. He saw him as proof that the values would live on. The torch could be passed without the flame ever going out. That is a beautiful thing for any leader to witness. Now, before we bring all 7 players together, we need to talk about a hidden weapon Duncan carried his entire career. It was not his shooting. It was not his footwork. It was his mind. More exactly, it was his incredible emotional control. And the stories about it are legendary. Take Shaquille O'Neal, one of the most physically dominant and intimidating players ever. Shaq described Duncan with one powerful word: unbreakable. Shaq admitted that his usual intimidating tactics and trash talk had absolutely no effect on Duncan. He said he could easily get in the faces of other elite centers and rattle them. But not Duncan. Duncan would just look at him with a bored expression, then quietly go out and outplay him. Imagine being so calm that the scariest force in the league cannot get a single reaction out of you. Then there's the story of Eton Thomas. In one game, Duncan blocked his shot. But instead of celebrating or talking trash, Duncan did something strange. He offered Thomas real, helpful advice. He told him how to get deeper into his body on the next play to avoid the block. Thomas listened. He followed the advice, and on the next attempt he scored. And what did Duncan do? He complimented him before calmly continuing down the floor. He helped his opponent score, just to prove he could not be ruffled. Steven Adams learned this lesson too. During his rookie season, Adams tried to play physically against Duncan. He wanted to bang and battle and get under the veteran's skin, but Duncan disarmed him completely with friendly conversation. He chatted with him. He was pleasant, and then he calmly dropped 20 points on him. The kindness was not weakness. It was a trap. It pulled Adams out of his aggression, and then Duncan went to work. Even Draymond Green, known for his fiery talk, got the same treatment. As a rookie, Green tried to trash talk Duncan. He got nothing back, just a silent, blank stare. That stare was so unsettling that Green decided never to speak to Duncan again. No insult could match the power of that calm, quiet response. There is something almost funny about all of these stories when you line them up. The biggest, loudest, most aggressive players in the league all tried the same thing. They tried to rattle Duncan, they tried to get under his skin and pull him into a battle of emotions, and every single time it failed. Shaq tried force, Adams tried physical play, Green tried words, none of it worked. Duncan simply would not give them the reaction they wanted, and without that reaction, they had nothing. They were left swinging at air while he calmly went back to work and beat them. Put all of these stories together, and you see the pattern. Duncan weaponized politeness. He turned good manners and emotional control into a competitive advantage. While others screamed and fought and tried to intimidate, Duncan stayed silent and calm. And that calm let him dominate early rivals like Latrell Sprewell, Stephon Marbury, and Allen Iverson. It proved that emotional discipline was the ultimate competitive weapon. The greatest strength of all is self-control. And it connects to every single player on his favorites list because every one of them shared that same steady, team-first mind. There is one more moment we have to talk about because it captures Duncan's place in history perfectly. It happened on December 31st, 2002. On that night, Michael Jordan's Washington Wizards faced the San Antonio Spurs, led by the Twin Towers of Duncan and David Robinson. Two eras were standing on the same floor. Jordan's team ended up winning the game by a narrow 2 points. But the final score is not the part people remember most. The part people remember is what Tim Duncan did. His performance that night was simply staggering. He recorded 35 points, he grabbed 13 rebounds, he dished out 5 assists, and he swatted away 5 blocks. He did all of that across 44 minutes of action. It was a complete, total domination of the game in every single area. But this game meant more than just a great stat line. It carried deep symbolic weight. Michael Jordan was the defining icon of the 1990s, the greatest of his era. And there, sharing the floor with him, was the player who would go on to build the most durable dynasty of the era that followed. It felt like a passing of the torch. The old king and the new builder, side by side for one night. Duncan stood as the bridge between two generations of basketball greatness, and his huge performance proved he belonged in that conversation. Beside him that night stood David Robinson, with the Twin Towers anchoring the Spurs against the man who had ruled the previous decade. Picture the meaning in that scene. One era was ending, another was just beginning, and the values that would carry the new era forward were already on full display. Duncan did not win the game, but he won something larger. He showed the basketball world that the future was in steady, disciplined, complete hands. So now we have met all 7 players. Magic Johnson, Bill Russell, Nikola Jokic, David Robinson, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, Kawhi Leonard. At first glance, they seem very different. They come from different eras. They played different positions. Some are guards, some are giants, some are old legends. Some are modern stars. So what could they possibly all have in common? The answer is everything that matters most to Tim Duncan. Look at the shared traits, and the picture becomes crystal clear. Every one of these players showed unselfishness. Every one of them brought a deep commitment to defense, or to lifting up the team. Every one of them played with high basketball intelligence. Every one of them carried emotional discipline. Every one of them put the team first. Every one of them was willing to sacrifice, and every one of them was focused on winning above all else. Now look at who is missing. There are no pure high-volume scorers who only care about their own points. There are no flashy personalities who chase the spotlight. There are no players known mainly for fame instead of substance. That absence is not an accident. It is the whole point. Duncan did not pick players based on popularity. He did not pick them based on scoring totals or athletic highlights or media attention. He picked them based on character and on the way they made their teams better. This is the big reveal. Duncan's list is not really just a list of favorites. It is a blueprint for greatness. It is a guide to everything he believes creates winning basketball. Each name is a value brought to life. Magic is unselfish vision. Russell is defensive discipline. Jokic is timeless intelligence. Robinson is veteran sacrifice. Parker is powerful partnership. Ginobili is putting team over ego. Leonard is quiet, lasting excellence. Together, they form a complete picture of what Duncan thinks basketball at its highest level should look like. And these values are not just nice ideas. They have real meaning for how teams are built. Duncan's choices point to a few powerful truths about the game. The first is that force multipliers matter more than high scorers. Notice that the players he chose all make their teammates better. They do it through elite passing, through hard screens, or through absolute defensive anchoring. Duncan believes the highest tier of basketball is reserved for players who lift everyone around them, not just players who fill up their own stat sheet. The second truth is that defense is the true championship anchor. By picking defensive stalwarts like Bill Russell, David Robinson, and Kawhi Leonard, Duncan reinforces a deep belief long-term winning is built on the defensive end. A team can have a cold night shooting the ball, offense comes and goes. But a disciplined, high IQ defense stays consistent night after night. It is the steady foundation that wins over the long haul. The third truth is about positional fluidity and cerebral execution. By including Magic Johnson and Nikola Jokic, Duncan shows his love for players who break the old rules of position. These are big or unusual players who can pass and create like guards. It suggests that the future of basketball does not belong to rigid, old-fashioned positions. It belongs to smart, skilled players who combine size with the ability to distribute the ball and pick apart any defense. Duncan saw that future clearly because he lived it himself. The beautiful thing is that these principles did not retire when Duncan did. They are still alive in San Antonio today. Since Duncan stepped away from the game, the Spurs have stayed true to the same ideas that built the dynasty. They still value player development. They still value quiet discipline. They still value long-term planning over quick fixes. The culture that Duncan helped create did not fade. It simply kept moving forward. And it has led them to their next great hope, Victor Wembanyama. The selection of Wembanyama is the perfect example of the Spurs' philosophy in action. He is a player with rare size, smooth coordination, and incredible defensive instincts. He represents the next step in the evolution of the front court, a giant who can do things big men were never supposed to do. In many ways, he is the natural continuation of the path that Duncan walked. Think about the line that connects them all. David Robinson taught Duncan. Duncan and Popovich built a culture, and now that culture is shaping Wembanyama. The foundational principles set down by Duncan, Robinson, and Popovich remain the ultimate guide for chasing championships. The names change, the faces change, but the values stay the same. Discipline, defense, intelligence, sacrifice, team first, always. That is what makes Tim Duncan's list so special. It is so much more than 7 names. When most players name their favorites, they are simply telling you who they enjoy watching. But when Duncan named his 7, he was telling you something far bigger. He was telling you exactly what he believes makes a champion. His favorite players were never simply his favorites. They were living examples of the values he believed create winning basketball. They were proof of his entire philosophy, gathered into one quiet, powerful list. Magic, Russell, Jokic, Robinson, Parker, Ginobili, and Leonard. 7 players who each carried a piece of the same truth. And that truth is the heart of everything Duncan stood for. Greatness is not about being the loudest. It is not about scoring the most. It is not about chasing fame or attention. It is about discipline, intelligence, sacrifice, and a deep belief in something bigger than yourself. It is about making everyone around you better. It is about staying calm when the moment is hottest. It is about winning, together, right way. In the end, his list serves as a blueprint for excellence. It is a quiet lesson from one of the smartest minds the game has ever known. Tim Duncan understood greatness on a deeper level than most players ever will. He saw past the highlights and the headlines, all the way down to what really wins. And in 7 simple names, he showed the whole world exactly what he saw.
What a play!
That's a violation.
What a good rhythm, and he got it.
You feel all the running won't affect you.
He's the GOAT. But for years, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was treated like he did not belong at the center of basketball's biggest debate. When fans argue about the greatest player of all time, the names come fast. Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, Magic Johnson. Those names light up comment sections and fill up highlight reels. But one name sits at the very top of the all-time scoring list. One name forced the NCAA to rewrite its own rules. One name built the most unstoppable shot in the entire history of the sport. And that name is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He won 3 national championships in college. He won 6 NBA titles. He earned 6 MVP awards. He played at the highest level for 20 full years. He scored more points than anyone who ever picked up a basketball. And yet, in the loudest conversations about the greatest ever, his name often comes in late, or it does not come in at all. As we look back at why so many legends still give Kareem his crown, you can give this video some hype too, so more fans see the story behind one of basketball's true kings. The case for Kareem does not start with a single moment. It starts with a life built around the game from the very beginning. He was born Ferdinand Louis Alcindor Jr. in New York City. He grew up in northern Manhattan, in a neighborhood called Inwood. Even as a child, he was not just thinking about basketball, he was thinking about what kind of person he wanted to be. He read books, he studied history. He paid attention to the world around him. He looked at figures like Rayford Johnson, the Olympic decathlete, and he admired the way Johnson was respected, not just as an athlete, but as a complete human being. That was what Alcindor wanted. He did not want to be seen only as a tall kid who could score. He wanted to be seen as a thinker, a person of substance, someone with something to offer beyond what he could do on a court. That mindset, that belief that real greatness begins in the mind before it shows up on the scoreboard, shaped everything that came after. When it was time to choose a college, Alcindor had one school on his list above all others: UCLA. He had dreamed of it since grade school. He actually wrote it down in a school album as his favorite college, years before any coach ever called him. In March of 1965, he made his first recruiting visit to the campus in Los Angeles. Then he sat down with head coach John Wooden. The office was modest, inside an old World War II building. Wooden did something that surprised young Alcindor. He did not lead with basketball. He led with grades. He looked at academic records before he ever looked at statistics. He told Alcindor directly that athletic careers are fundamentally temporary. They end. The body ages. The game moves on without you. But knowledge, Wooden said, stays with a person for life. That message landed hard. That was the kind of place Alcindor wanted to be. He chose UCLA. And what followed was something the sport of basketball had never quite seen before. Before Alcindor was even allowed to play varsity ball, he was already sending a message. In his freshman year, he led the UCLA freshman team in a game against the varsity squad. That varsity team was the reigning national champion. They had already won the whole thing the year before. They were loaded with talent. They were supposed to be untouchable. And Alcindor and the freshmen beat them anyway. It was a preview. It was a signal of what was coming. When he finally stepped onto the varsity floor for real, he made the whole country take notice on his very first night. His varsity debut came on December 3, 1966. He went out and scored 56 points against the University of Southern California. That set a school record. That was not a soft performance in a warm-up game against a weak opponent. That was a declaration. That was a young man stepping onto the biggest stage available to him and immediately telling everyone exactly who he was. From 1967 to 1969, Alcindor led UCLA to 3 straight national championships. 3 years in a row. 3 titles. 3 times earning the Most Outstanding Player award at the NCAA tournament. His teams did not just win, they dominated. He went 88 wins and only 2 losses across his 3 varsity seasons. When you think about all the games played over 3 college seasons, with pressure and opponents and everything that can go wrong, going 88-2 is an almost unreal achievement. He was not part of a great team that happened to win. He was the reason the team was great. Without him, they would have been a good program. With him, they were unstoppable. He was so far ahead of the competition that the sport itself felt the pressure to respond. And it did. After the 1967 season, the NCAA made a decision that had never been made before in the history of college basketball. It banned the slam dunk. The Rules Committee explained the ban by calling the dunk an unskillful shot. But people inside the sport understood what was actually happening. The rule was aimed at Alcindor. It was a specific attempt to remove one of his most powerful tools from the game and slow down what he was doing to the competition. The situation even had an official name. It was called the Alcindor syndrome. The sport identified his dominance by name and then tried to legislate against it. Years later, when the ban was finally lifted in 1976, the Rules Committee chairman confirmed publicly that the rule had indeed been put in place, specifically to neutralize what Alcindor was doing near the basket. The sport changed its own rule book because one player was too good. Think about what that means. An institution as large and powerful as the NCAA looked at one college player and decided the only answer was to change the rules. That is not normal. That does not happen. It happened here because Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was not a normal player. But here's the part that changes everything about how you see this story. Alcindor did not quit. He did not become bitter. He did not shrink. He took the restriction and turned it into fuel. John Wooden told him to see the ban not as punishment, but as an opportunity. He told him the restriction would force him to develop a more complete skill set. He told him that a player who could only dunk was limited. A player who was forced to find other ways would become dangerous in a completely different way. Alcindor listened. He took that message to heart. He worked on a shot that he had already been developing, a move that used his body, his height, his touch, and his intelligence in a way that no one had ever quite put together before. He refined it. He sharpened it. He made it automatic. And what came out of that process became the most famous and most feared offensive weapon in the history of basketball, the skyhook. To understand why the skyhook was so special, you have to picture it in your mind clearly. Kareem would establish his position near the basket. He would plant himself, feel the defense around him, and turn his body sideways relative to the rim. His non-shooting shoulder and his arm would swing into position between the defender and the ball. That created a physical wall, a shield. The defender could not reach through Kareem's own body to get to the basketball, then Kareem would leap. He jumped off his non-dominant foot, which allowed his shooting arm to extend freely without being blocked by his body. At the very top of his jump, he released the ball. His hand was reaching somewhere between 10 and 11 feet above the floor at the moment of release. The ball rolled off his fingertips with soft touch and traveled on a steep, high arc toward the basket. It came down into the hoop at an angle that made it easier to go in cleanly. And by the time a defender had processed all of this and tried to react, the ball was already past them and already on its way through the net. The physics of it were remarkable. A defender watching Kareem set up in the post had 2 choices, and both of them were bad. The first choice was to try to anticipate the shot early and jump before Kareem released the ball. The problem with that was Kareem was already taller than almost every player he faced, and his release point was up near 11 feet. Even if a defender guessed right and jumped at exactly the right moment, they usually could not get their hand high enough to reach the ball before it was gone. The second choice was to wait until the shooting motion actually started and then contest it. The problem with that was the shot was already in the air. By the time it was clear he was releasing, the reaction time required to jump and reach the ball after seeing the motion begin was simply more than a human being could manage against a shot released at that height. So the choices were jump too early and miss, or react too late and still miss. The defense was always a step behind. The skyhook put every opponent in an impossible situation every single time it was used. Hakeem Olajuwon, one of the greatest post players the world has ever seen, said it plainly during the 1986 playoffs. He noted that once Kareem established his routine near the basket, he could launch that skyhook over any defender in the league. Not most defenders, any defender, not most situations, any situation. Even Mark Eaton, who stood 7 feet and 4 inches tall and won the Defensive Player of the Year award multiple times, could not find a way to get to it. Kareem's release cleared Eaton's reach. A man who was nearly half a foot taller than the average NBA center still could not stop the shot. The height advantage that defenders thought they might have, the extra inches that should have made the difference, simply did not matter once Kareem had the ball and his mechanics in motion. Bill Russell, who never faced Kareem in a professional game, but who understood defensive basketball as well as anyone who ever played, spent time thinking about how he would approach the skyhook if he had to guard it. Russell was one of the greatest defensive minds in the history of the sport. His answer was honest and realistic. He believed the best approach was not to try to block the shot itself, because that was almost never going to work, but to put physical pressure on Kareem before he received the ball. Russell noted that Kareem preferred to operate about 12 feet from the rim when he set up to shoot. If a defender could force him to catch the ball further out, even a few feet further, the angle would change, and the efficiency of the shot would drop. The arc would be longer, the rhythm would be different. It would make the shot harder to execute at its usual high percentage. But even Russell was careful in how he said this. He framed it as a way to reduce the damage, not a way to stop the move. The skyhook had no true answer. It only had better and worse ways to deal with the damage it caused. Compare it to the other great post moves in basketball history, and you begin to see how different Kareem's weapon really was. Hakeem Olajuwon built the Dream Shake out of footwork that he first learned playing soccer as a child. He explained his approach to younger players almost like a physics lesson. He talked about load-bearing walls and columns in construction, how you make a defender shift his weight to one leg and then attack that leg before the defender can move it. The Dream Shake was unpredictable and brilliant. It forced defenders to guess and then punished them for guessing wrong. Dirk Nowitzki and Kevin Durant developed high-release fadeaway shots that combined their exceptional height with a backward lean that created extra separation from the defender. Shaquille O'Neal used mass and force. He planted himself as close to the basket as he could get, absorbed contact, and scored over or through whoever was there. Each of these moves was elite. Each was nearly impossible to stop when the right player used it under the right conditions. But the skyhook was something different. It did not rely only on footwork, so a defender who was quicker could not simply stay in front of it. It did not require a fadeaway lean that a long defender might still be able to reach with exceptional timing. It used body shielding, vertical height, precise touch, and a release point that existed above where most human beings could put their hand. Other great post moves could be disrupted under the right defensive pressure. The skyhook, once Kareem was set and in his rhythm, was almost always simply above where the defense could go. This is the shot that built 38,387 career points. That number is still the all-time scoring record in NBA history. It has stood for decades. LeBron James chased it for his entire career and eventually surpassed it. But it took one of the greatest players who ever lived the better part of 2 decades of elite performance to get there. Every single point that Kareem ever scored in the NBA has the skyhook at its foundation. And the skyhook itself was born from a rule that existed specifically to slow him down. The system tried to take something away, and Kareem built something immortal out of what was left. The people who faced him and played alongside him have never forgotten what he was. Magic Johnson spent years running the floor in Los Angeles with Kareem as the anchor of the team. Magic has said clearly and repeatedly that Kareem was the smartest player he ever shared a court with. He watched Kareem master every detail of basketball. Not just the physical skills, but the mental approach, the preparation, the film study, the understanding of how defenses would try to attack him. Magic has specifically said that when comparing great centers across basketball history, Kareem stands alone at the top. He placed Kareem above Shaquille O'Neal when asked directly to name the best center he had ever seen. That is a statement from a man who played alongside both of them, who ran offenses built around each of them, who understood exactly what each one could and could not do. His answer was Kareem. Larry Bird spent some of the most intense playoff moments of his career competing against Kareem. The Boston Celtics and the Los Angeles Lakers built one of the most famous rivalries in basketball history during the 1980s, and Kareem was at the center of the Lakers' side of that rivalry. Bird pushed back hard against the idea that Kareem does not belong at the top of the all-time list. He pointed out that Kareem's impact was immediate from his very first professional season with the Milwaukee Bucks. He was not a slow starter who needed time to figure out the NBA. He arrived and he was already dominant. Bird asked a question that is hard to answer with any real logic. How do you keep someone like that off any all-time list? The honest answer is that you cannot. You look at what he did across his entire career and you acknowledge that it was extraordinary, and you put his name where it belongs. Julius Erving knew Kareem as well as almost any opponent could. They competed directly against each other 26 times across their careers. The record between them was perfectly split. 13 wins for Kareem, 13 wins for Erving. It was as close to an even competition between two legends as the sport has ever produced. Erving's teammate Moses Malone sometimes suggested that Kareem had not truly outplayed him in their individual head-to-head matchups. But Erving himself looked at the full picture and reached a different conclusion. He called Kareem the ultimate franchise cornerstone. He talked about how Kareem elevated every teammate he played with, how players around him became better, how the team became more dangerous because he was in the middle of it. He named Kareem as the greatest player of all time. Not one of the greatest, the greatest. That comes from a man who competed directly against him, who fought for every win, who understood the difficulty of what Kareem was doing from the closest possible perspective. Years after both of them retired in 1992, Erving and Kareem played a televised one-on-one exhibition called Clash of the Legends. The final score was 44-21. Kareem won by 23 points. Even deep into retirement, even long past the era when either of them was playing regularly, the result was not close. The crown stayed on Kareem's head. Shaquille O'Neal came into the NBA with a combination of size, strength, and skill that reminded people of the great centers from previous generations. He went on to become one of the most dominant forces the sport had ever seen. When the conversation among fans and analysts turned to the question of who the greatest center of all time was, Shaq gave his honest answer. He looked at Kareem's longevity, his titles, his scoring record, his consistency across 20 years, and he placed him in a category that felt separate from everyone else. Even a player as dominant as Shaq acknowledged that Kareem's place in history was above his own. Isaiah Thomas experienced Kareem's intelligence firsthand in the most pressurized games imaginable. The Detroit Pistons and the Los Angeles Lakers met in the NBA Finals in the late 1980s. Thomas was playing some of the best basketball of his career. He was assigned to help double-team Kareem in the post, which was one of the few strategies that gave the defense any real chance of disrupting the offense. Thomas moved into position. He closed in tight on Kareem, and Kareem looked him directly in the eyes and asked a simple question. He said, "Hey, is this your man?" And before Thomas could even begin to process what was happening, before he could decide how to react, Kareem dropped a perfect pass right over his head to Magic Johnson, who was standing exactly where Kareem knew he would be, for an easy layup. 5 words. One look, one perfect pass. It was basketball intelligence operating at a level that went beyond any physical skill. Kareem was reading the floor faster than everyone else on it. He saw where the help defense was coming from before it arrived. He knew where Magic would end up. He knew exactly how to get him the ball and exactly when to release it. Thomas was not just trying to defend a body, he was trying to keep pace with a mind that had been studying the game for longer than Thomas had been playing it. Thomas also witnessed something during the 1985 finals that stayed with him for the rest of his life. Kareem was 38 years old. The Boston Celtics had made public comments suggesting that Kareem was past his prime, that he was too old to be a real defensive challenge, that the Lakers should not be leaning on him to carry the offense. Those comments reached Kareem, and something changed in him. He went out and played like he needed to prove something, which at 38 years old and after everything he had already accomplished, he absolutely did not need to do. He won Finals MVP at 38 against the Celtics in the championship round. Thomas watched all of this unfold and said something that became one of the great quotes attached to Kareem's legacy. He said he just hoped he would even be alive at 38, not that he hoped to be playing well at 38, not that he hoped to be competitive at 38. He said he hoped to be alive. That was the level of amazement Kareem produced, not just as a young dominant force, but as a 38-year-old man who had enough left to be the best player in a championship series. Kobe Bryant was relentless in his pursuit of knowledge about the game. He studied the greats, he watched film, he borrowed from footwork and techniques that came from players who played before him. When Kobe started thinking about how to extend his career and maintain his effectiveness as his body aged, he studied Kareem. He watched Kareem's footwork. He paid attention to how Kareem prepared for games and for seasons. He looked at the discipline and the long-term approach that allowed Kareem to stay relevant for 2 decades. Kareem became a direct model for Kobe, proof that preparation and intelligence could extend a career in ways that pure athleticism alone could not. LeBron James eventually became the player who broke Kareem's all-time scoring record. Throughout that pursuit, LeBron spoke about Kareem with consistent respect. He saw Kareem as the ultimate example of what longevity in the NBA could look like, a player who had not just lasted for 20 years, but had stayed productive throughout, who had adapted his game as his body changed, who had figured out how to remain meaningful at an age when most players had already retired. That kind of consistency across time requires intelligence about your own body, discipline in how you train, and the ability to keep evolving when things that used to work start to fade. Kareem had all of that. Michael Jordan is almost always at the center of any GOAT conversation. His name is usually mentioned first. His championships, his scoring titles, his defensive ability, his competitiveness, all of it adds up to one of the most complete packages in basketball history. And Jordan acknowledged the skyhook specifically as something that had no real peer. He said that nobody in the history of basketball created a more unstoppable signature move. Jordan spent his entire career developing offensive weapons that defenses could not fully answer. He understood what it meant to have a move that put the defense in an impossible position. He looked at the skyhook and recognized it for what it was: a shot without a true counter, a weapon without a real defensive response. When Jordan says a move is the most unstoppable in history, that means something. The rivalries Kareem navigated throughout his career helped define and strengthen his legacy. He first encountered Wilt Chamberlain as a teenager at the famous Rucker Court in Harlem. Chamberlain was his idol at that point. He was the greatest center the sport had ever seen. Wilt looked at the young Alcindor and offered an unusual compliment. He said he wished he had legs like that. It was an odd thing to say, but it revealed something. Even the greatest center of a previous era could see that something remarkable was coming. As Kareem's career grew and his accomplishments stacked up, the relationship between the two of them became complicated and eventually hostile. Wilt felt the pressure that comes with watching your successor rise to challenge your place in history. He began using media platforms to criticize Kareem. He suggested publicly that Kareem should have retired years before he actually did. Kareem eventually responded directly in his 1990 autobiography, where he addressed his former idol with words that were harsh and personal. He accused Chamberlain of quitting on his team when things got hard and pointed to specific moments in Chamberlain's career as evidence. He had deeper objections as well, about Wilt's political choices and his public statements about women. The exchange was raw and personal. It showed that the pressure of all-time greatness is real and heavy, and that even kings argue with each other about who holds the crown. The rivalry with Julius Erving was different in its texture. They competed intensely on the court and held deep respect for each other off it. That perfectly even head-to-head record across 26 games, 13 wins for each of them, is one of the most remarkable statistical facts about that era. Two legends, meeting repeatedly at the highest professional level, unable to separate themselves over the course of their careers. It was the kind of even competition that tests both players in every possible way. And Erving, who had experienced Kareem's game from the closest possible distance, still named him as the greatest of all time. There is one season in Kareem's career that reveals something important about how the world perceived him versus how he was actually performing. In the 1977-78 season, Kareem was not named an All-Star. It was the only time in his entire 20-year career that this happened. The catalyst came in the season opener against Milwaukee, when a rookie center named Kent Benson elbowed Kareem hard in the stomach during a play. Kareem was in real pain. He reacted by throwing a punch. The punch fractured his own hand and kept him out of the lineup for 2 months. He missed 20 games. The Lakers went 8-12 without him, which is exactly what you would expect from a team that just lost the player holding everything together. When the coaches who vote for All-Star reserves sat down to make their picks, they had only seen Kareem play 31 games. Some of them also penalized him for the punch. They saw it as a character issue, an overreaction that told them something negative about him, even though he had been the one who was elbowed first. But look at what his numbers said while all of this was happening around him. He was averaging 25, 8 points per game. He was averaging 12, 9 rebounds. He was averaging 4, 3 assists. He was averaging 3, 0 blocked shots. He led the entire league in player efficiency rating. He was the most efficient individual player in the entire NBA that season. He was named to the All-NBA second team. He was named to the All-Defensive second team. He finished 4th in the MVP voting. By every measurable performance standard, he was one of the best players in basketball during those 31 games, and he was not selected as an All-Star. Perception punished him when the numbers said he deserved to be there. It was one of the clearest examples in his career of the gap between what he was actually doing and how the public saw him. The contrast with his final season makes this point even more vivid. In 1988-89, his last year in the league, Kareem was averaging 10, 1 points and 4, 5 rebounds per game. He was 42 years old. He was not playing at an all-star level by any reasonable standard. Don Nelson, coaching the Golden State Warriors, said publicly that all-star spots should go to players earning them on merit. And he was not wrong. Kareem himself agreed with that sentiment. But when Magic Johnson suffered an injury and needed to be replaced on the all-star roster, Commissioner David Stern named Kareem as the replacement. He played in the game and scored 4 points. He ended his final all-star appearance with a skyhook. It is a poetic ending to that chapter, but it also illustrates how narrative and legacy shaped his treatment in ways that did not always match the actual performance. In 1977-78, when his numbers were elite, perception worked against him. In 1988-89, when his numbers were modest, legacy worked in his favor. The inconsistency reveals how much of how he was seen was shaped by things outside his control. Off the court, Kareem built a legacy that extended far beyond basketball and cost him something real in terms of public image. On June 4, 1967, a 20-year-old Alcindor traveled to Cleveland. Jim Brown, the legendary football player, had organized a meeting at the office of the Negro Industrial Economic Union. 12 leading African-American figures gathered to discuss Muhammad Ali's refusal to enter the military draft. Ali had made a decision based on his religious beliefs and his conscience. He was the heavyweight champion of the world, and he was willing to give up his title and face prison rather than fight in a war he believed was wrong. Several of the people who came to that meeting were skeptical. Some intended to convince Ali to compromise with the government and protect his career. They asked him hard questions over several hours. Ali held firm. He did not waver. And when the meeting ended, the group made a collective decision to stand with him. They held a press conference to support Ali's right as a conscientious objector. Alcindor was shaped by everything that happened in that room. He was especially shaped by watching Bill Russell navigate the meeting calmly and logically without anger, using reason and clear thinking to work through a complicated moral question. That became Alcindor's model for how to approach activism throughout his life. Not rage, not performance. Thoughtful, reasoned advocacy for what was right, even when it was costly. This commitment to speaking honestly about social and political issues never left him. When Michael Jordan made a remark during a 1990 Senate race in North Carolina that suggested he was unwilling to use his platform for political purposes, Kareem responded publicly and directly. He said Jordan had chosen commerce over conscience. He said that a person with Jordan's reach and influence and cultural power should not be afraid of losing endorsement money when civil rights and human rights were the issues at stake. This was a bold statement. It put Kareem in direct public disagreement with the most famous basketball player alive at the time. It did not make him more popular. It did not generate positive press coverage. It cost him. The cost of speaking his mind was something Kareem lived with throughout his career. The sports media frequently described him as cold, arrogant, or uncommunicative. These labels followed him. They shaped how casual fans understood him. They created a public image that many people accepted without examining whether it was actually true. Isaiah Thomas found these characterizations deeply unfair and found them painful to think about. He called the media's treatment of Kareem a tragic construction, something built up by people who did not want to engage honestly with who Kareem was. Thomas pointed out that Kareem was among the most articulate and intellectually engaged people he had ever encountered in his life. Kareem wrote books. He published essays on history and politics. He made documentaries. He engaged with complex ideas about race and justice and American history at a depth that very few athletes of any era have attempted. Thomas argued that the media did not call him uncommunicative because he had nothing to say. They called him uncommunicative because they did not like what he was saying. When his voice challenged comfortable narratives or questioned figures the media wanted to celebrate, they responded by suggesting he was difficult or detached rather than engaging with the substance of what he was actually saying. Pat Riley coached Kareem in Los Angeles and watched him from a closer vantage point than almost anyone outside the game itself. Riley has been consistent and clear about where he places Kareem in basketball history. He says Kareem is the greatest player of all time. He points to longevity and mental toughness as the qualities that set him apart. He makes a specific distinction that is worth paying attention to. He says other legends came into the NBA with potential, with raw ability that needed to develop over time. Kareem came in and bypassed that stage entirely. He was already great from the very first game he played at every level. He did not grow into a champion slowly. He arrived at every stage of basketball as a force and stayed that way. Modern conversations about the GOAT tend to be shaped by things that Kareem's legacy does not easily provide. They favor highlights. They favor perimeter players, guards, and wings who can do spectacular things on both ends of the floor that are easy to film and easy to share. They favor social media presence and shoe deals, and the kind of fame that comes from being constantly visible. They favor moments that can be replayed in a short video clip and generate a reaction. A 56-point varsity debut in 1966 does not exist on social media. A skyhook over a 7-footer in the middle of a regular season game in 1979 is not going to trend on any platform. The way modern sports culture processes greatness makes it structurally harder to see what Kareem was. The format works against him, but the people who actually played in his era, the ones who actually tried to stop him, the ones who actually had to build game plans around containing him, they do not need a highlight reel. They carry the memory with them. They know what they faced. Julius Erving said he was the greatest he ever played against. Larry Bird asked how you keep him off any list. Pat Riley said he will always be his greatest player. Magic Johnson placed him above Shaq. Isaiah Thomas called him the best and said the media's treatment of him was one of the most painful things he had witnessed in the sport. These are not casual opinions from people who watched from the outside. These are verdicts from competitors and teammates who understood the game at its deepest level and who measured Kareem against everyone else they had ever seen. Now step back and look at the whole picture. A child from Manhattan who dreamed of UCLA before anyone was recruiting him. A college player so dominant that the sport rewrote its rules to try to slow him down. A man who turned that restriction into the most unstoppable offensive weapon in basketball history. 3 national championships in college, 6 NBA titles as a professional, 6 MVP awards, 20 seasons played at the top level of the sport. The all-time scoring record. A finals MVP won at 38 years old. Pure testimony from the greatest players in the history of the game pointing to the same conclusion. Cultural courage that put him in direct conflict with comfortable narratives and cost him goodwill that other athletes protected by staying quiet. Intellectual engagement with the world around him that went far beyond what any sports media outlet gave him credit for. A career that proved greatness at the highest level is not limited to one era, one team, or one decade. Basketball royalty is not about the loudest highlight. It is not about the most retweeted moment or the most recognizable shoe. It is about what you built. It is about how the sport reacted to you. It is about what the people who faced you say when they speak honestly about what you were. It is about whether the greatness held up across time and pressure and change and age and every challenge the game could throw at you. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar dominated every level he ever played at. He forced the sport to change. He built an unblockable shot out of a rule designed to limit him. He stayed elite for 2 full decades. He won when everyone said he was past it. He spoke his mind when staying quiet would have been easier and safer. He carried himself with intelligence and dignity under pressure that broke other people. And the greatest players who ever lived, the ones who tried to stop him and could not, the ones who coached him and watched him work from the sideline. They still say his name first when the question is who was the best. That is not a debate anymore. That is a verdict. It has been delivered by Magic Johnson and Larry Bird and Julius Erving and Isaiah Thomas and Pat Riley and Shaquille O'Neal and Michael Jordan. It has been delivered by the record books and the championship banners and the scoring totals that stood for decades, and it has been delivered by a career that was not just great at one moment in time, but was great from beginning to end, at every stage, at every level, against every challenge. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is not just one of the greatest basketball players who ever lived, he is basketball royalty. He earned that crown in college. He kept it for 20 professional years. He never let it go. And no amount of shifting conversation or changing media format or new generation of debate will take it away from him. The legends already gave their verdict. The crown belongs to Kareem.